everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessica Mraz. I'm the Communications Specialist for New Mexico Main Street. We have a great presentation for you today. Let me tell you a little bit about New Mexico Main Street. We are a program of the New Mexico Economic Development Department with a mission of downtown revitalization and redevelopment. You can learn more about our program at nmmainstreet.org, and you can see on the map all of the programs that are spread across the state right now. Just a few housekeeping tips as well. We will be taking questions at the end, so you can type your questions in the questions panel or the chat panel, and I'll be monitoring that. You can also download this handout in the handouts section, and this webinar is being recorded, so we will be sending you a YouTube link at later today, so you can review it later as well. Let's see here. We do have a few more webinars coming up. Next week is Entrepreneurship as a Recovery Strategy. You can register for all of these webinars on our website at nmmainstreet.org. While I have your attention, I'll give a quick plug to the census. It's really important that you complete your census and encourage your neighbors to do so as well. You can learn more at icountnm.gov. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about our presenters today. Amy brings more than 12 years experience in urban design and landscape architecture with a unique focus on educational landscapes, play environments, and pop-up interventions in public spaces. She is a licensed landscape architect in New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas, and is an ISA certified arborist. Will is a New Mexico native from La Luz. He has spent more than a decade working in architecture firms and preservation agencies within the U.S. and Europe. His professional experience includes new construction, infill, retail, and commercial development, preservation of historic buildings and cultural assets, and business design improvements. Code compliance, grant administration, pedestrian and public space improvements, and infill design are integral aspects of his community development work. So with that, I will turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Jessica, and hello, everyone. We're really excited to have you all here with us today while we share with you the creative design measures that we're seeing businesses and communities take to adapt to this rapidly evolving health and economic crisis that we're in the middle of, with stay-at-home orders and other safety measures like physical distancing. We've really had to change the way we do business and the way that we interact with each other. And this is challenging, devastating even for many businesses, artists, craftspeople who have traditionally relied on in-person contact for their promotion, sales, and service delivery, not to mention the challenges that we're facing in trying to stay connected as a community. So how are our communication methods changing in this time? While we shelter in place, our media consumption behavior has in general shifted towards higher use of online and social media sources. Which makes sense. You know, the rapidly changing situation means that we really need access to real-time media, so we know what's going on right now. So with that in mind, as we put this presentation together, Will and I really found ourselves combing the internet and social media for up to the moment examples of how businesses and communities are adapting, both locally and abroad, because we know, different countries are in different stages of the pandemic and staying at home and reopening. So as designers, we're both visual people. Images do such a great job of explaining a situation, especially when it's new and kind of weird. So many of the examples that you'll see in this presentation are direct screenshots from Instagram or Facebook, or YouTube with the source noted. So we encourage you to take down that source and search for those handles if you do see something that you want to know more about. So here in New Mexico, we've seen many businesses rapidly pivot to maintain communication and provide service to customers online instead of in person. Quick plug for the New Mexico Economic Development Department creating the Buy NM Local website. If you haven't seen that, please check it out. so that it's a clearinghouse basically for local businesses to provide products and services online where they may not have done that previously. Businesses can easily register and make their contact information or website readily available to shoppers. And also another plug for our local Main Street organizations. These folks have been superheroes and have been working overtime to get the word out to their communities regarding which businesses are open, who's doing delivery, curbside pickup, and or gift sales. So just a quick example of this screenshot is part of a series of videos that Truth or Consequences Main Street has been doing, posting on Facebook and YouTube to highlight their downtown businesses, their products, and how to get to them. To go beer in this case. Many of our small local businesses are doing an incredible job themselves, marketing their goods and services through social media. This is an example of the Bar Castañeda in Las Vegas. They regularly post mouth-watering imagery of their food with their delivery and our pickup hours. Social media is a really flexible way to share this information, as hours and offerings may change significantly from day to day. And restaurants are minimizing contact by allowing customers to order and sometimes pay online or on the phone, pick up meals with very limited interaction. Max Steak in the Rough, which is pictured here at the right, has actually seen an increase in business because of their drive-through capabilities. Have heard stories about people staying to eat in the parking lot, actually meeting friends and conversing from a safe distance in their cars. And I'll hand it over to Will to talk a little bit more about drive-through and curbside pickup.
Yeah, briefly, I'm going to talk about drive-throughs. Many businesses will eventually inquire about drive-throughs and retrofits for the windows. These can be helpful to distribute goods, but they do have some drawbacks. They're typically quite expensive. They can range from $25,000 up to $50,000 and even more. And moreover, the available space required for vehicle stacking and queue lengths may not be possible depending upon the building. You can see the graphic here where it shows a typical drive-through business, and you can see how the cars, how they stack and they're required. And I show here on the to the right different types of businesses and the queue lengths that are required. So drive-through window retrofits are not as easy as many people think, and I just want to talk about that. But luckily there are alternatives. And one thing I want to address briefly too is this is a temporary situation. So these retrofits likely would not pencil out in the long run. And so our next slide, you can see a lot of businesses are taking advantage of curbside pickup, and they're utilizing their parking lots. I've witnessed it where I live, and there are a lot of really creative and new innovative things happening around that. In fact, we've even seen people do really wild things where they've devised systems and rigged up, roller skates, as you can see, to get goods out to passengers in their cars. Next slide, please.
Okay, I can jump back in here. So one of the other neat adjustments that we've seen communities make is the transition of farmers markets to drive-through markets. So farmers are still getting fresh local produce to their communities using this method. Customers have the opportunity to order ahead of time, but stay in their car while still supporting local farmers. So on the left here, we see the Corrales Growers Market drive-through map, which they made available online ahead of time so that shoppers knew where to go and how this was all going to work. And then on the right here, we see an example of the growing popularity of virtual hugs, which highlights the important social interaction that happens at markets like this. Food isn't really the only essential service that they provide. So finding ways to still have contact safely is really important. Here's some examples of downtown Albuquerque Growers Market posts. Again, just this ability through social media to share rapidly changing conditions and opportunities. Here the opportunity for folks to order online ahead of time. And Will, I'll hand it to you for this one.
Thank you. In here, we've listed a few things from the Food and Drug Administration regarding food handling safety considerations. Establish pickup zones, practice social distancing when delivering. Technology may assist this through email and text alerts, and you can conduct and evaluate your facility for deficiencies regarding 6 feet minimums in practice. Here, we've got some businesses listed below. It's really interesting right now how the supply chain has been disrupted. All this food that typically was going into restaurants no longer has a place, and it isn't simply as just shifting it into the grocery supply food chain. So what we've found is some really creative solutions where people have utilized their supply chains, businesses, restaurants, and they've actually been supplying eggs, flour, napkins, all kinds of things to consumers. And so they'll set out a table and you can purchase things online or over the phone, and your items will be placed outside. And also, this is a great time for food trucks. Many businesses have food trucks that are extensions of their businesses, and they're allowed to open them in front of their businesses and provide the food that they would normally be serving out of their restaurants to people in parking lots and sidewalk areas. Next slide, please.
Okay, so other, sort of progression in design that we're seeing related to municipal support. Some interesting things going on in terms of places providing, free parking for free curbside pickup. I think that's happening in a lot of places where municipalities are just not charging for on-street parking. Another thing is municipalities providing community maps of different services, whether it is where there's free parking, or on the right here you see the Albuquerque Coronavirus Data Hub, which if you haven't checked it out is a really excellent resource if you're in the Albuquerque area for a number of things, including meal pickup sites, Wi-Fi hotspots, testing locations, and outdoor open space. So hopefully folks know that they have a lot of options for outdoor places to go and we don't end up with parks that are too crowded. Artists and craftspeople are also working with the municipalities, or their main streets to find ways to continue sharing and selling their work through virtual art walks or markets, because we can't do those things in person right now. We see on the left information on Farmington's virtual art walk, which is hosted on their municipal website. And then at the right, Truth or Consequences Art Hop, which is posted on Facebook. So in both of these situations, the artwork is posted online, and then folks have a chance to view it and purchase it if they desire. In addition to changing up the design of our service and product delivery, many businesses have also just completely redesigned their products, right, to respond to the crisis and remain relevant. So we see Tractor Brewing's pivot to distill hand sanitizer, which they sell to the public, but also provide in large quantities to local hospitals. And at the right, Kay and Molly's creation of face mask kits that folks can use to make masks out of their hand towels. We've also seen some really cool creativity in virtual storytelling related to the sale of goods. Short videos, again, are really popular to showcase products and modified service delivery. This is a really unique example in Raton. Their Cash Mob project showcases a particular establishment's products infomercial style. So they take a couple hours in one evening and showcase all the cool stuff that these stores sell. And this, they found, has raised some local businesses as much as the typical month's income in one night. So people watching can purchase as they see the product presented, and then pick those things up in like a curbside pickup the following day. So if this is something that interests you, please, you can just search for Raton Cash Mob or Raton MainStreet on Facebook, and these ladies are really happy to share their methods if it's something that you're interested in learning more about or doing. Then I'll pass it back to Will to talk a little bit about resources.
Yeah, with information changing almost on a daily basis, we wanted to give you guys the most current orders and ordinances. Here, you know, as many of you know, the governor had a press conference last night, and here at the bottom of the screen, we've listed the things that are changing and what has not changed from what we currently have in place. And the links above are the stay-at-home orders and the essential businesses listed by the state of New Mexico. I'll give you guys a minute to see the bottom, see what's changed and what's not. Okay, next slide, please, Amy. This is also an additional link for businesses regarding guidelines and orders from the state of New Mexico. And then our final slide regarding this is a document put out by New Mexico MainStreet regarding business readiness upon reopening. This checklist was created by Sean O'Shea, one of our co-workers, and it's centered on 4 items: contact, cleanliness, control, and connecting. And again, I won't read all these to you in the essence of time, but this will be archived within the document that we're going to send to you.
Right, and I'll just note, if you guys do download the PDF, you know, in the sidebar from the presentation, all of these links are hot linked in the PDF document. So there's real easy access to these sites through that document. Moving into, you know, kind of where I think we're, you know, one of the things that Will and I are trying to get our heads around is how do we support our communities right now, and businesses in this new transition to, you know, the current, you know, we're still trying to figure out, I think, how to really effectively serve people without contacting each other. But as things begin to reopen too, there's a lot of things to consider. And so I want to note that some of the stuff that I'm showing you, you know, we won't be there. New Mexico won't be there for another month or maybe more because, you know, because of the caution that the governor is taking in reopening. But I think these are all things that we can start to begin to think about and start to begin to support our businesses in helping to plan for them. So as things do begin to reopen in the coming months, it's really important that businesses take the necessary precautions to not just keep their staff and customers safe, but also create an environment that feels safe, right? It's not going to be a lot of help to reopen if people don't feel comfortable coming out and purchasing goods and services. So one major component of this looks like it's going to be the need for more space, right? For the same amount or less people, so we can still stay 6 feet apart. For restaurants, this might mean expanding patio space, as we are learning that it is safer to be in an outdoor environment than indoors with recycled air. For other stores, creating safe places for customers to line up or wait while still staying 6 feet apart. Speaking from personal experience, this last week or so, venturing out, staying 6 feet away from other people can be difficult, right? We're not used to it, and it can feel like we're being rude by asking people to keep their distance. So businesses, I think, can play a really important role here in providing visual cues and physical barriers to help keep us all in line. Floor tape, for example, is now readily available if you Google it online. It can be used to mark places where you're supposed to stand or mark off limits areas. It can be done simply with an X or a line, or more artistically, but should always be clear and represent the necessary distancing. And I just note in the picture on the right, I think that like horizontally the dots are far enough apart, but if you had all those people standing in there, you've got people diagonally that are still too close to each other. Floor decals with messaging are also widely available online for purchase. I'm sure that there's ways that you could do this yourself as well. And additional eye-level signage is another way to remind people to comply with spacing requirements. While many sign companies are offering customizable signs for purchase, this is a link to a site where you can download and print free signs of your choice. I think they have like hundreds of different messages on the signs. So it may just be a place to go to if you want to make your own signs for ideas for messaging. Here's some examples of some creative signage. I'm not really sure what the significance of the geese is in Toronto, but now that I've seen this, one on the left, every time I go out, I get this police dot stuck in my head. So maybe now some of you will too, and you're welcome. Businesses may need our help figuring out how to mark, barricade, or locate furniture to comply with spacing requirements. There are free space and capacity calculators online. If that's not something that they're already familiar with, we just want to make sure to double check that everything is in compliance with the New Mexico state requirements as they come out. And so it may take a little trial and error or just very detailed attention to find instances like the sink on the right that needed to be blocked off to prevent people from standing right next to each other and getting too close. Plexiglas barriers are another way for people to get closer for payment transactions. And I couldn't find any images of it, but had heard about instances where maybe putting two plexiglass sheets together allows you to put messaging within the plexiglass, and you can still clean both sides. There's a lot of ways we can block stuff off, right? So my point here is that, and I think this is one of those strange silver lining areas that we're seeing emerge. The way we designate safe space and communicate safety messaging is actually potentially a really cool design and branding opportunity. Signage and markings are great potential branding and promotional opportunities for businesses. That's the way we typically communicate. I think many of you have probably already seen these major companies' revised logos. But I think there's a really cool opportunity here for us to work with our local businesses and organizations to help them customize their message to promote their products and services. Face coverings are all required now for all of us, and do present yet another way to showcase a product or service, no matter how weird it is. I'm not really sure what these people are selling over here, but they have it on their face mask and the message is clear. And Will, I'll pass it over to you for this slide.
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to share with you this creative approach to social distancing dining from the Netherlands. These are small enclosed greenhouses set 6 feet apart. Quite a unique solution to this. But what if you can't afford a greenhouse? Next slide, please. Here you can see some innovative solutions that effectively accomplish the same thing, and just letting people still be outdoors, enjoying services, but still maintaining 6 feet distance. Next slide, please.
So yeah, I think the point is really that we can do a lot of this stuff, and we can do it creatively, we can do it inexpensively. In addition to branding and promotion, we're finding new ways to connect as a community and share arts and culture. This I thought was a really neat example of the Nob Hill Car Show, a chance for people to make car-related art and share in a safe manner. But again, examples of how we can pull our local arts and culture into the safety messaging and safety practices so that it's relevant for us and potentially even, fun. We see here the inevitable tendency, I think, for people to want to continue to play and be creative and, to have a good time, even in times of, or especially in times of hardship. And we focused mainly so far on changes to business and retail space, but I think very soon, as we watch reopening efforts in other parts of the world and the country, we are likely also going to see adjustments to the design of public space. Whether that's, on the left here, the narrowing of roads to provide additional sidewalk space, or improving bicycle and other pedestrian infrastructure to reduce the need for parking, so that we have that ability to take over parking spaces, maybe temporarily for a place to safely wait in line, as shown here on the right-hand side, or maybe even provide outdoor restaurant seating. And I think that that's something that, as MainStreet, we're available to help communities start to look at those different opportunities. I guess just in closing here, I wanted to say that I think it's important to remember that all of these design changes, have the intention of protecting the health, safety, and well-being of our families and our friends and our communities, and that we can and should be artful, creative, and joyful in the process of figuring it all out together. And Will, I don't know if there's anything more that you want to add before we go to questions.
Yeah, the last thing I would say is, we still are helping our communities. A lot of the work we're doing is through correspondence right now. So for those of you who are partners in the MainStreet communities, if you have issues that you're trying to work through, sometimes we can help you troubleshoot them. So please reach out to us, phone, email, and we'll do our best. But we're in uncharted territory. So as designers trying to come up with new solutions, it has been challenging, but it doesn't mean it's something we can't take care of and help you with. So please reach out to us if you'd like to.
Yeah, and this is our emails, contact information. Please do get in touch with questions, or if you're seeing something in your community that's really cool that you want to share, please do that as well, because it's so helpful to see what other folks are doing and what's been successful or not. So I think with that, Jessica, we can go to questions.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. That was great. So please type your questions and comments in the questions panel. While you're doing that, I'll just give a quick plug for next week's webinar, which will focus on the need to support entrepreneurship and innovation in communities across New Mexico. Sean O'Shea will look at entrepreneurship as a strategy in economic development, models of support programs for entrepreneurs and innovators, and resources available to launch entrepreneur support programs in your community. And you can register for that on our website. Okay, so I have a comment here. Point of information, food distribution companies such as Ben E. Keith and Shamrock are now putting a limit on supplies to restaurants. Many places that are selling supplies to their customer base will no longer be able to do this. So just FYI on that. Thank you for that. Next one, thank you for the presentation. It is incredible how the business community has found creative ways to conduct business. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And let's see here. Not seeing any more questions or comments. We'll just give it another few seconds because sometimes they come in a little later. Okay, here's a couple. What are your thoughts on convincing cities to do parklets?
I can take a stab at answering that one, or at least my thoughts. I mean, I think that parklets can be a couple of different things, but I guess if we're talking about parklets like in parking spaces, that actually can be a pretty easy way to get a little bit of street space, because you can pay for the parking space for a day. I don't know how many of folks who are watching or listening are familiar with the Parking Day celebration every September, where communities all over the world take over parking spaces for parklets. But it is something that does require conversation and coordination with your local municipality, and depending on different code requirements, can be challenging. And I think that, that's something that we didn't really touch a whole lot on in the presentation, but with a lot of these design interventions, we do have to be very careful that we're still providing ADA compliant access, and that we're still complying with fire code access and egress. Again, just to make sure that these spaces are safe places for people to be. Personally, I think parklets are a great way to take back streets and take back, the largest source of public space that we have, which are our streets, and are usually overtaken by cars. And I think in this time, we've really seen how streets can be used differently when we don't have as many cars, and when we feel more comfortable riding our bicycles or walking outside, because the air is cleaner and there's less noise pollution. So it's going to be interesting, I think, how all of this experience may change how we view streets as public space in the future. Will, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, concerning the ADA considerations, typically if a business is in compliance already with their outdoor spaces and indoor spaces, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, if they're modifying something that may have a grade change, that may be something. We haven't come across that yet. Of course, there's always going to be unique situations with this. But so far, if a business, and it should be, already has ADA compliance, any alterations, moving people further apart and moving them outside versus inside, it should be okay. One scenario might be as if a business is taking over a space that was not utilized previously as public space, they would just have to make sure that the ADA considerations are met with grade change and widths and ramps and etc., stuff like that.
There was another question about what ADA considerations have you come across? Did you have anything to add about ADA?
Well, we work a lot on historic properties, and generally historic properties, they sometimes have issues that are grandfathered in. A lot of our districts, our Main Street districts, have older buildings in the heart of their districts. And we've had to work on things similar, like I was working on a high school recently in Albuquerque. I think it was in 1907, former post office that was converted into a high school, and there was an issue with the stairs, and they're certainly not ADA compliant. But working through the city of Albuquerque, we had determined that those stairs can remain as they are, just not encouraged to be used by everyone. So there is flexibility, particularly if the building is historic. But what we have to do typically with new construction and remodels is it does have to be brought up to current standard code. This, of course, is outside of COVID discussion, because this is really new and we haven't had to face that yet. But I would imagine if anybody's making alterations or using their business in a different way, ADA would certainly need to be considered. And you can rely upon us to reach it. You can reach out to us, and we might be able to help you troubleshoot some of these issues as well.
Great, thanks. There was a question, just a clarification about Shamrock, so I'll read this aloud again. Just that Shamrock is putting limits on supplies to restaurants. So many places, if you're selling supplies to your customers, you may no longer be able to do that, but you better just check with them before you do that. Okay, what are some of the best ways to connect with businesses to help determine who needs help and wants assistance?
That's a great question, and I mean, some of it I think depends on, you know, who is asking the question, you know, who reaching out to businesses. But I guess I'll give an example. In Corrales, I have recently, this last week, met with their MainStreet executive director, and we walked the MainStreet district, and where business owners were at their place of business, we were able to have, you know, socially distanced, of course, and with our masks on, discussions about what they were doing to, you know, either support the ongoing, you know, curbside pickup or delivery, but also what they were going to be preparing for in reopening. And we were able to, you know, by walking the district, really start to look at the physical space and which businesses might, you know, we thought retail may need assistance with this as well. If we think about a lot of our, you know, some of the art galleries or antique shops, you know, they're small spaces. And so making sure that people can stay 6 feet apart in the building may be difficult. So there may be a need to look at, with some of those smaller spaces, moving the display of goods outside potentially. And so yeah, we started to look at where are places adjacent to those businesses, or are there, you know, sort of more communal areas where businesses could set up tents. All of this being very hypothetical, because we don't really know what the restrictions are going to be for retail and restaurants once, you know, dine-in and retail sales become an opportunity. But I guess I would say that, you know, figuring out ways to communicate with your businesses, whether it's online or, you know, socially distant in person, that is something that Will and I can absolutely provide assistance with. Again, you know, even if it's virtually, if we're looking at an online, you know, a Google aerial of the different businesses, talking about different spaces. Will, I'll let you add anything that you'd like to.
Yeah, you know, many of our communities in New Mexico are Main Street communities, and the executive directors in their respective towns, they're good people to reach out to, and then they're able to put you in contact with us if that's necessary. But they have their own processes and abilities to help as well. So if you're in a Main Street community or an arts and cultural district or a Native American or frontier community, all who are served by New Mexico Main Street, reach out to the points of contact there, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions. Over the long term, do you think the trend for home delivery will encourage businesses to move away from main streets to find lower rents elsewhere?
That's an interesting question. Maybe I'm just always very optimistic, but I actually think it might be the opposite. I think as we miss what we took for granted for so long, that we might actually move back into wanting to spend time in our downtowns and socialize and patronize our small mom and pop stores in our Main Street districts. So I'm sure there will be some of that, but I have to hope that you know, the human experience where we want to spend time with each other will actually draw us and bring us back more into our downtowns and into our businesses.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Will. I think my hope is that we, you know, we do miss that local experience, and that this has really highlighted the need to support local businesses, not just in times of crisis, but all the time. I think the other thing is that, you know, this has required a lot of our small local mom and pop businesses to figure out how to do online sales and create a website and, you know, do delivery or curbside pickup. And I think that, you know, that's a valuable tool for them to continue to use down the road, because it's just an additional way to provide their goods and services. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think flexibility is going to become really important over time with businesses, and like Amy had just mentioned, both ways. They're going to be learning new tools and new avenues to perform their work.
Okay. How do you think downtown businesses will address public restroom issues?
Well, I've noticed the businesses that I've been into, which hasn't been a lot in the last month or two, the public restrooms have actually been open. I don't know if that's the case with all businesses, but they have been open, and I think because people want to wash their hands and use soap and water. Um, I don't know any specifics regarding that because we don't have any guidance from the state. So maybe it's case by case, depending upon the business, how comfortable they feel opening the restrooms. But again, I think we all know that if you have a business and you don't have a restroom that's available, people are not going to patronize it. But at the same time, if people aren't allowed to come into your business, I think this is probably the heart of what Flo is asking is, how are you, where are people going to use the bathroom if they can't come inside? So, boy, I know, so I used to work in Texas a lot, and a lot of food trucks, they would have these parks where the food trucks would congregate, and they would all chip in to have these porta potties that would be in the spaces, the parks, and that seemed to be pretty effective. I think businesses are probably either we're going to have to find a way to allow people inside to use the restrooms, and this has not been clarified yet, or maybe they're going to have to invest in rentals for for porta potties or things like that, depending upon the size of the business. It's a good question. I'm sorry we don't know the answer to that. It's just so new, but it is a good question.
Okay. Are there any examples of how vacant buildings or properties could be used in recovery strategies?
Not yet. Haven't seen anything like that. It's a interesting question. We certainly have vacancies in our downtowns, and these spaces, right now, spaces at a premium. If everybody needs to be a certain amount of feet apart, it might be a way to reprogram some of these buildings and get them used again, give them some validity. So I had never thought about that. That's a really great question.
I think, I've heard some examples of, like maybe parking garages or larger spaces being repurposed for performance areas where people can stay further apart. And I think there is the example of, using vacant spaces for clinics or medical treatment areas when the hospitals are running out of space. None of that I think is really that relevant locally. So again, I would echo what Will said. I've not seen any application of that locally. There's different stuff happening in more urban centers, but yeah, I think there's opportunity there for sure, and we should keep that in mind as we're trying to come up with creative solutions.
Okay. This business owner's current space is too small for safe social distancing. Do you think the only option would be to go totally online? If getting a larger space at this current time is not a possibility?
Yeah, well, we're all hoping this is temporary and not going to last too much longer. So I can understand investing in a more expensive, larger space may not pan out in the long run. Online, I don't know about totally online. I'm wondering if there's, and you can follow up with an additional comment, give us some more information, but I'm wondering if the exterior of your business has an opportunity to provide services during this this transition that we're having.
I think the other thing that I would add, in the thought that if buildings are too small to accommodate very many people, you do have the option to only let one person in at a time. And I think, the other thing that's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out is that, many of our, more rural main streets especially only get a couple of visitors a day. And so the whole notion of 25% occupancy just doesn't really matter because that's what's normal. So, it could be depending on the kinds of activity that you anticipate in your store, it may be a non-issue. And that's where a lot of this stuff is just sort of hard to anticipate because we're not really sure what the state requirements are going to be and how people are going to react once we're all able to go out again. I wish we could be more helpful with an answer for that.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think that's all our questions and comments. Thank you everyone for joining us, and look out for the follow-up email from me later today with this recording, and let us know if you have further questions or concerns. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.